Something in your wildest dreams, straight out of a magazine. We show up and we kill the scene. I got what you want, I got what you need. We're moving and we don't look back. So quickly it just might crash. We kill it like a heart attack. We got what you want, we got what you need. Let's go. I'm talking out of control. We got the best show. You're coming with me, cause we bring the party. Let's go. I'm talking out of control. We got the best show. You're coming with me, cause we bring the party.
Welcome to this week's episode of the MACyard Brawl podcast. I'm Todd Worley, and with me is Memphis Spence.
What's going on, guys?
We've got another great show for you today. We're going to take a look at what's happening around the MAC. We're going to take a deep dive into the giant I-75 game coming up this week. And for those of you that like to put some action on these games, you should know that our bets from last week's show went 4-2 and almost 5-1. Kent State, I said I liked Kent State to cover at 20.5, and they lost by 21. So we were that close to being 5-1, but still 4-2 is okay. And with that 4-2 record, that brings the combined record for our last two shows to 11-2. So, point spread, yeah, not bad, right? So if point spreads, over unders, and prop bets are your thing, you need to subscribe now so you don't miss out this week. This week's MACyard Brawler of the Week is Bowling Green tight end Harold Fannin Jr., who could have won it just about any week this week, or this season. I'm sorry. This past week in the win over Kent State, they won 27-6, and he caught 10 passes for 171 yards, and leading his team to a big bounce back win in the MAC. Really impressive player. Obviously, the stats are incredible, and for a lot of tight ends in college football these days, it's kind of like a blocking optional type of thing, and very anything but physical. We'll just leave it at that. But he's not like that. He's a tough kid. He's really good blocker at the second level in particular, and also a willing blocker at the point of attack as well. And I think that's only going to continue to improve with more reps and with more coaching. But it's already further along than a lot of the college tight ends that you see. And he's just a true junior on top of that.
I can see him going maybe even fourth, third round, somewhere around there in the draft if the team's really interested.
Yes, I was going to get there in a second. I think like in the passing game, you've got the way his ability to create separation with his explosiveness, his southernness, his top end speed, his feet, the way he stems his routes. Not many tight ends can do that. Then on top of that, the way he catches the ball in traffic outside his frame, routine catches. He doesn't have focus drops. So those two areas are really impressive. Then probably the most impressive is what he does after the catch. He turns into kind of like definitely like a running back, but then almost like a Mike Allstott type of running back where he's running through people, he's carrying guys. His balance and power are really impressive. But then for a guy his size, he's also elusive in space. It makes guys miss, and obviously explosive and fast. He's a nightmare after the catch. And so that's why it's like he can turn a 3-yard catch into a 75-yard gain at any time in any game. Just a nightmare to game plan against. And you talked about the NFL draft. I think that he's listed at 6'4", 230, and I think that is going to be what – and sometimes those measurements on a website are very accurate. Sometimes they're not even close. So I think his verified measurements, his height and arm length in particular are going to be key here. Like right now, I think he's in that second, third round wheelhouse, and then but very much could be in play for the first round, depending on how the rest of the season shakes out, what his measurements are. And then if he participates in an all-star game, and then what he does in the combine. So how he handles the pre-draft process. But I mean, right now, I'd say easily a 3rd round grade, probably a 2nd round grade, and then a 1st round grade could be in play depending on how things shake out. So amazing season this year, and have to give massive amounts of respect to the Bowling Green staff for believing in him out of high school and developing him and helping him get to this point. And obviously for him for Harold to work so hard and put himself in this position. Congratulations to him on a great week and a great career so far.
Fantastic. You deserve this award, Harold.
Absolutely. Next up, we've got our MACyard Brawl Whip Around.
What's up, MACyard Brawl fans? Drew Bailey here, sports director at WZIP-FM at the University of Akron, looking at my Zips, taking on Eastern Michigan this week. The Zips are 1-6. Coming into this week's game, 0-3 in MAC play. We've lost 4 straight to Eastern Michigan. Quick injury report. Senior defensive lineman Bennett Adler has been beat up, but he's good to go this Saturday. He's got 3 sacks and is a big leader on the Zips defensive line. Junior wide receiver Alex Adams listed as questionable. He's yet to play at all this season, so if he does play, would be a big jolt for the Zips offense. Adams was first team All-MAC back in 2022, the team's leading receiver that season. Would be great to have him back, obviously. A player to keep an eye on for me in this game is Todd Bullock, the backup quarterback. He's been used in limited quantities this season. He's kind of taken on a Swiss Army knife role. He rushed for 2 touchdowns in the Zips last game against Western Michigan, but we've seen him line up as a receiver, seen him pass the ball as the backup quarterback. Not sure how he'll be used, but it seems like when he's on the field, good things happen. The story for the Zips, unfortunately, nothing new through 7 games. We're 1-6. Like I said, we've had a few games where we had the lead, like the 17-0 start we jumped out to against Western Michigan. We had the game against Bowling Green where we had a shot at the end to tie or take the lead in that game. Haven't been able to convert or put things together when we need to. So we're coming off the bye week. I think now is the time for the Zips to make a breakthrough, for some progress to be made. Akron's finished 2-10 each of the last 3 seasons, and progress alone is not obviously the goal, but the Zips have the chance to improve upon last year's record, past year's record. We got 5 more games of MAC play, 2 consecutive games at home at InfoStation, including this Saturday against Eastern Michigan and next Saturday against Buffalo. Now is as good a time as ever for the Zips to get that first MAC win of the season. Go Zips.
Rachel Lindsay from the Buffalo News, here to give you a weekly update on the University of Buffalo football team for MACyard Brawl. MAC standings are in a logjam behind Western Michigan. Buffalo can earn some valuable real estate this weekend with a win at Ohio. Here's the problem. UB has won 1 game at Peden Stadium in Athens since 1997 when it beat the Bobcats in 2008 down in Ohio. UB and Ohio are 6 teams tied for second in the MAC behind Western Michigan, and UB's got to do 2 things to prepare for Ohio. We've got to move past a loss that was ultimately determined by a questionable first down call in the final minute that gave the win to Western Michigan last weekend. They also have to focus on offensive consistency. UB had a season-high 551 yards of offense against Western, which was a product of explosive plays and simply needing to keep pace with the Broncos in a MACtion-type game. UB is also going to be without nickelback Savion Brown, who's out for the season after undergoing surgery on his right leg Monday. So expect Jalen McNair or Deion Crawford to start Saturday at nickel at Ohio. Again, UB Ohio, noon, Peden Stadium in Athens.
And in other news, Buffalo this week travels to Ohio in a battle of 2 teams that are both 2-1 in MAC play. So really big game for both squads to stay in contention for the MAC title. Central Michigan travels to Miami, and the Red Hawks, had some early season struggles, have started to get things rolling a little bit. And then let's see if they can keep that up and stay in MAC title contention. Eastern Michigan travels to Akron. Eastern Michigan, one of those other 1-loss conference teams looking to stay in MAC title contention. And Akron's still looking to get off the mat in MAC play. Haven't won a conference game yet, and the Zips have been close. Let's see if they can get done this week. Northern Illinois travels to Ball State, and Kent State travels to Western Michigan. And Kent State hasn't won a game yet this year, so this could be a kind of a season-defining win for them if they can get it. And Western Michigan is the only undefeated team in conference play this year, so let's see if they can keep rolling. And now, if you are a MAC football fan, I would think you would know this by now, but in case not, this week's MACyard Brawl of the Week has to be Bowling Green at Toledo. not only is this a huge I-75 rivalry, no matter what the records are, but this year in particular, you've got two teams that they've been playing close games lately, some classic games against each other lately. And this year, they both have the talent and the experience to contend for the MAC title. And the loser of this game, they both have one conference loss early on. And so the loser of this game could see their MAC title hopes take a major hit. So neither team can afford the loss. They both have to win this game for the conference title race this year. But then you also have a huge amount of bragging rights as well. So such a big game, and we're excited to highlight and feature this game. Joining us today, we've got two reporters, both with the Toledo Blade, but representing both sides of the rivalry. First up, we've got Kyle Rowland, who covers the Rockets for the Toledo Blade. Thanks for joining us. So Toledo had a disappointing loss at Buffalo 2 weeks ago, and then this past week had a nice bounce back win at NIU. What were the players and coaches saying about what the keys were to that win and how they felt about the game?
Yeah, I mean, I guess defense obviously was the key. 13-6, pretty ugly game. Think combined 13 punts and 8 turnovers on down. Just some stats you're not really used to seeing. But offensively, I mean, Toledo didn't turn the ball over, so that was huge. They converted the only touchdown of the game, which was a huge difference. Their kicking game seems to be pretty good. Dylan Kunanen has not missed a field goal since the opener. But I thought the defense was just unbelievable. I mean, NIU got some rush yards, but all in all, I thought it was a great, bounce back in terms of after Buffalo had torched them running the ball. So I thought it kind of went how I predicted. I mean, there was no reason to really think Toledo would win. And statistically, NIU is the more impressive team, but it just kind of felt like Toledo would win an ugly game, and they did.
They definitely did. What I thought, if I remember correctly, when you were on our show last week, you were talking about you were kind of expecting the bounce back game from the defense, and that's exactly what they did. And then, so I thought that was impressive. What obviously Tucker Leeson missed a game, and there's some other injuries too. What if anything do you know about the status of Tucker and some other guys?
Yeah, I mean, I would think Gleason will play this week. I mean, number one, he was available for interviews on Monday. I thought that was just kind of an interesting thing. I mean, maybe it's misdirection, who knows? But it just didn't seem like whatever happened against Buffalo is something that's going to keep him out for a considerable amount of time. I would expect him to start. I mean, I'm kind of going into it envisioning he'll start. I think they need to get Jacquez Stewart back. I mean, he was questionable on Saturday. Obviously, wasn't in there, didn't get any carries in the run game. I still think they need him just for the aspect of, he can break one. I mean, he's just got that speed and elusiveness. I mean, he can catch the ball well out of the backfield. I mean, he's the one who had the game-winning touchdown against Bowling Green last year. So I just think he's an added element that helps Toledo's offense. Other than that, I mean, I think they're pretty solid. I mean, the offensive line on Pro Football Focus graded out really well last week. No, they didn't run the ball like unbelievably well or whatever, but I mean, Savon Clark and Connor Walzak both averaged over 4 yards a carry, which is a good number. I thought that the line was solid, the running back. I mean, everything was just kind of good enough for them to win. I mean, they need offense against Bowling Green. I don't think this is going to be an ugly, defensive slugfest like last week. So they need all hands on deck. They need to be able to throw the ball. We'll see.
Gotcha. Did Gleason say anything about his injury and his media availability, or he kind of kept it close to the vest?
Yeah, I mean, just getting better every day. Same stuff guys always say.
Yeah. Kind of a specific question for you. Early in the game, I think you mentioned the turnovers on downs for both teams in the NIU game. Did Jason Candle say anything about, I think Toledo had it like around the 25-yard line and elected to go for it rather than kick a field goal early in the game. Did he say anything about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're mentioning the at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, Toledo had a huge win behind them. The first quarter ends on fourth down. Then they're going directly into the wind. And I asked him about it because at the time I was like, what are they doing? Like, why? And he said the previous play ended with 2 seconds left and it should have been fine, but the clock kept running and it ran out. He mentioned it to the officials, and obviously nothing happened. So that's kind of why that happened, because it was a weird thing, because it was like 4th and 6 or 7, I think.
Right.
And it really didn't make much sense. So he's blaming the clock for it. But yeah, I mean, they definitely were going to kick a field goal if they were going the opposite direction.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay. So spinning forward this week, I know that this is a huge game for both teams, obviously, both for this year, but then every year for the rivalry. And then 2 years ago in 2022, Bowling Green pulled the shocker at the Glass Bowl with that big pass play late in the game. What does this game mean to the Rockets on a macro level to beat Bowling Green?
Yeah, I'll answer this both ways, honestly, because I was talking to this with one of our other writers the other day. I mean, I think this is a massive game on Saturday, and I think it's a massive game just kind of for both programs, more so Bowling Green, but a little bit Toledo. I mean, it's essentially an elimination game for the MAC title game, I would say. I mean, you're going to have 2 losses, and you're going to not have the tiebreaker against one of your teams that's, main competition. So I think the loser's basically out. So it's huge for that. It's huge for the rivalry. I mean, you always want to, beat your rival. It's a huge game for the area and everything. You deal with Bowling Green and Toledo people every day of your life when you live here. I mean, you see them at the grocery store, you see them at the bank, you probably work with graduates of both schools. So it's just like omnipresent every day. So you always want those bragging rights. And then, going forward, I mean, for Bowling Green, I think this is the biggest game of the Scott Loeffler era. I mean, it's year 6. This was kind of the year everything was set up for you. They were kind of a trendy pick to make the MAC title game and even win the MAC. Brought back a lot. I mean, they have a really good team. They almost beat Texas A&M and Penn State. And then if you lose this game and you're already basically out of the MAC race, I think they'd have 5 losses overall. I mean, it's just like, if that's happening in year 6, I mean, what exactly is the future of the program? And then for Toledo, I mean, to beat Mississippi State and have all the excitement, you've gone to the MAC title game the last 2 years, you won 11 games last year, and to have 3 losses now in October after, that great win over Mississippi State, I think would be incredibly disappointing for them. So I think there's just a lot on the line for both teams.
Definitely. And I know, until 2022, Toledo had really owned the rivalry in recent years. BG pulls the upset at Toledo in 2022. Toledo gets revenge last year. Is there an element of, like in the Michigan State rivalry, you've got the little brother thing. Is there an element of that? Is there that sort of dynamic between Toledo and BG?
I don't think there's necessarily a little brother element, but there's definitely, I mean, Toledo's the city, Bowling Green's, more rural. So you kind of have that a little bit. Lucas County, where Toledo is, the big city or whatever you want to say. And it's the opposite in Wood County. But I think it's a mostly friendly rivalry. Like, do have coaches, throughout the history of the rivalry not liked the other school? Like, yeah, obviously. But I mean, amongst fans, I mean, these people are your neighbors. I mean, it's definitely not as hostile maybe as Ohio State, Michigan, which is another huge thing in this area. But it definitely, I mean, it's a massive, massive deal. And when Toledo and Bowling Green play, I mean, it's the single biggest, event on the sports calendar in Northwest Ohio. And it's on a Saturday this year. The weather is going to be unbelievable. I think it's going to be an all-time kind of tailgating pregame scene on Saturday this week at Toledo. It's going to be a sellout. I mean, I think it's going to be awesome. You talk about like the little brother element. I don't think that exists, but I do think there's I don't know if it's become psychological yet. Maybe if Bowling Green won this year, it could be. But I mean, Scott Loeffler absolutely has Bowling Green ready to play against Toledo every year. And they generally do not have as much talent. They haven't been near as good. I mean, twice he has won as a double-digit underdog over Toledo. He's beaten Minnesota. He's beaten Georgia Tech. He almost beat Penn State and A&M this year. The only other problem that he has is his team plays down to competition a lot too, which I think can be frustrating, for their fan base or whatnot. But I have no doubt that Bowling Green is going to come in and play one of, if not their best game of the season. That's just kind of how they've been under Loeffler.
Once again, great stuff is always from Kyle. He's such a gem, and we're so fortunate. Exactly, we're so fortunate to have him join us, and Rockets fans are fortunate to have him covering their favorite team. Next up, we've got Michael Burwell, who again works for the Toledo Blade but covers Bowling Green, and this is his first time on the show, and we're excited to have him. You briefly mentioned injuries. Are there any key injuries heading into this game that you're aware of with Toledo?
There's a few. It's going to be interesting to see the wide receiver core. Malcolm Johnson Jr. had a great touchdown catch against Kent State. He left that game with an injury. We'll see if he comes back. A couple other wide receivers. Finn Hogan was out. RJ Garcia II, transfer from Kansas State. He's been out all year, but he seems to be close to coming back. If BG can get any of those three receivers back, that's going to be enormous for them, because they're kind of thin at the wide receiver position to begin with. They've been beat up all year. I think only half of the wide receivers on the roster are even healthy at this point. So any of those three coming back this week would be big. Coach Scott Loeffler basically said we'll find out on Saturday if they play. But I think for the most part that's the biggest injury concerns. They got back tackle Nick Reimer last week. He missed the previous 3 games with an injury, and that was big because the offensive line, the starting 5, there's really, really good camaraderie with them. I mean, they're huge. They average like 6'6", 314 a person. So him coming back was pretty big. I don't believe they have too many other injury issues, but it is going to be interesting to see about the wide receiver core if any of those 3 guys can come back.
Gotcha. Okay. Talk about this rivalry a little bit. Really big for both sides, and I know that 2022 win at Toledo at night in the snow when it's snowing sideways, and to pull out the last minute win like that had to have been one of a career highlight for a lot of these guys. To me, from the outside looking in, seemed like that might have been one that kind of got the players and coaches over the hump in terms of thinking like this is all paying off. Everything we're doing is paying off. Where do you think that, like, how big of a game is this? This is obviously a big game for conference standings this year, but how big is this rivalry on a macro level for the BG program?
Yeah, I mean, it's enormous. I mean, every year, I mean, this game is always circled on the calendar. I mean, it means so much to Northwest Ohio. I mean, the Toledo and Bowling Green communities. I mean, even last year, the game was at Bowling Green, and obviously on a weeknight during MACtion, and that stadium was packed. I mean, and it wasn't great weather. I mean, it wasn't snowing, but it wasn't that good of weather. And I mean, just the communities care so much about this game. And I mean, I know BG, they care deeply about this game, and as does Toledo. I mean, both sides. I mean, this is it for them. This is, there's a lot that they want to accomplish in the year, like during the season, but winning this game means everything to them. And given just the league implications right now, obviously the standings are so kind of congested right now towards the top. Both of these teams are 2-1 in the league. Honestly, this loss could do it. If whoever loses this game, it may knock them out of the MAC championship. So along with the rivalry aspect of it, just the fact that it means so much in the league standings now is pretty significant.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing what Scott Loeffler and his staff have built there. I know I've been scouting BG since before that staff took over, and just to see the the difference in the level of talent and just the on-field product. It's night and day. It's really impressive what they've done, win or lose this week. And so talk about so obviously you can't talk too long about the Falcons without bringing up Harold Fannin Jr. He's had an amazing season, unbelievable season, and that's an understatement. An absolute difference maker in every sense of the word. How did they get him? Like what was his recruitment like, and who were they battling for him, and how did that work?
Yeah, so to be honest, early in his high school career, he was getting some looks from, I mean, not really sure what level, but he was definitely getting some looks. And then I talked to his high school coach recently for a story, and he just kind of mentioned he was one of those COVID kids that kind of got caught up as far as academics. I think he got a little bit behind. I think maybe that scared some teams away or scared some schools away. Not completely sure, but Bowling Green was either his only offer or one of only a couple offers that he received, which is, I mean, he didn't get an offer till I think late in his senior year. I know he didn't commit until late in his senior year, but he came from Canton McKinley High School. I mean, he was a superstar there. The coach and Scott Leffler had a really good relationship. Scott Leffler is from the area. And basically the high school coach was just like, listen, you can't miss on this guy and just, give him a chance. And I mean, Harold stepped right in as a freshman, had 4 rushing touchdowns, which is unbelievable. And then last year, first team All-MAC as a sophomore. And I mean, it's just every week this year, there's a highlight reel catch. I mean, he makes the most mind-boggling catches, and it's weekly. And he's doing this not only against, MAC schools, he's doing this against the best defenses in the country in the toughest environments. I mean, he torched Penn State and Texas A&M in back-to-back games. I think close to 300 combined receiving yards, 19 catches, 2 touchdowns between the 2 games. So it's an interesting story. I mean, I know, he wasn't really highly recruited late in his high school career, and BG gave him a late offer, and he committed there. And he's pretty loyal to the Falcons. Obviously, he stayed this year, and I mean, it's paying off for him and the team for sure.
Great stuff from Michael there. Loved what he was able to share with us about Harold Fannin Jr.'s recruitment. I thought that was really interesting. And now we are going to analyze this game. This is such a good matchup. And first, I'm going to talk about just Bowling Green's kind of their strengths and weaknesses on both sides of the ball. And then we'll get into Toledo, and then we'll see how these teams match up here. For BG, open conference, obviously you had the 2 close, tough losses to Texas A&M and Penn State. And then open conference play with a close win over Akron. Lose a disappointing one at home to Northern Illinois, and then bounce back with a win over Kent State. So where this team is, I think they're still kind of trying to find themselves. Who are we? I think that BG sees themselves as MAC title contenders, and I think most people would agree with that. But this is the first, after the this is the first conference game since the disappointing loss to NIU where BG has a chance to prove that in the conference. And to be able to do that against Toledo, and 2 years ago, Bowling Green had a huge win late in the game at Toledo. It was a night game. It was a MACyard game. It was snowing sideways, and it was one of those classic wins for the Falcons.
Yeah.
And this is, kind of returning to the scene of the crime. Let's see if BG can get it again this year.
Looks like we've come to the end of another show. And if you're not a MACyard brawler or in the Brawlers Club, you can't get any of the rest of the show. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the opportunity to join today. If you're not part of the club, join today, and you can actually get the rest of the show where we go over all of the action in the MACyard. All of it. 11-2 so far the last couple of weeks, and you're going to want to have this information if you don't have it. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. For Todd, I'm Spence. Special thanks to both Michael Burwell and Kyle Rowland, and really the Toledo Blade for loaning those guys out to us for this show. Thank you for another episode of the MACyard Brawl. We'll see you next week.